So one particular thing that I'm very fond of doing is observing companies that have achieved some level of success over the last couple of years, seeking out their goals, their mannerisms, their visions, and how they implement all of these things in order to achieve the level of success that they've gotten to. On the contrary, there are companies that haven't achieved that level of success. At one point, they might have been up, and then at the next point, they might have experienced a downfall. And that's exactly what we're going to look at today. Today, I'm going to be looking at one particular company that is near and dear to my heart, Blackberry. So let's get to this video.
Blackberry once reigned as the king of smartphones, selling more than 50 million units at its peak. The company started out creating pagers and handsets, but the first iteration of its smartphone, complete with an iconic keyboard, took shape in the early 2000s. Soon, Blackberry phones were everywhere. At one time, Blackberry controlled 43% of the smartphone market in the US and 20% globally. But now, the company doesn't make smartphones anymore. And in January 2022, it stopped supporting its phones entirely, essentially making Blackberries obsolete. So what happened? In 1984,
That's what I want to know, because I remember a period of time where BlackBerry was everywhere. I had one, every friend I know had one. It was something that was seen as a phone that was almost geared towards executives. So as a teenager, you would want to push to have a BlackBerry because it almost made you feel like you had some status to you. That is, I believe, their marketing strategy that they went with. But as you know, at some point it fell off.
two Canadian engineering students, Mike Lazaridis and Douglas Fragan, formed Research in Motion. In 1989, the Canadian telecom company Rogers contracted Research in Motion to work on its Mobitex network, a system specifically designed for messaging, giving the company a leg up as an early leader in mobile messaging. Fast forward to 1996, when the company created its first two-way pager. It supported email and could communicate with other devices on its network wirelessly, which was an innovation at the time. In 2002, the company unveiled its first cell phone. For the next few years, it improved on that design, gradually adding features like a color display, Wi-Fi, and a built-in camera.
That's one particular aspect that I hated about the phone. It was that little ball that you had to drag the mouse with. I hated that. The other features of the phone, or what really got to me, was two things: the buttons and BBM, Blackberry Messenger. That is what's ultimately sold me on this. Other than the fact that I've heard that BlackBerry's never been hacked before. I don't know how honest and how true that is, but it was the phone, the buttons, and the factor of BBM Messenger that really caught me.
BlackBerry figured out a way to make its phone indispensable to the wealthy and powerful. And having it really meant something about who you were as a person. It was a status symbol. And that's where we got that name Crackberry. People were almost addicted to it and addicted to that feeling of, oh.
Yeah, they called it Crackberry because everybody was addicted to this phone. There was no putting it down. When you had a BlackBerry in your hands, you would be on it all day. I mean, we do that today with the smartphones, but back in the day, you didn't just do that with the smartphone. You did that with the BlackBerry. You'd be on BBM all day, and all of your friends all had BBM, so all day you'd just be messaging back and forth.
Always being connected.
The BlackBerry had a simple design and an easy learning curve, and it was clearly marketed to business professionals. With a BlackBerry, they could respond to emails or browse the web, basically anything they might normally need a computer to do. And there was one other beloved feature, BlackBerry Messenger.
The BBM messaging service was a key component of BlackBerry's success as well, because they figured out really early on that people wanted to have an instant connection to people. They wanted to be able to message back and forth without limits. And being able to BBM also added you to that really exclusive club of BlackBerry-only users.
By 2007, the company was pulling in more than $3 billion in revenue, with a net income of more than $631 million.
So good numbers, very good numbers actually for a phone company, especially in the early 2000s. I'm trying to remember, was this prior to or just after the smartphone? Because I remember the first Apple would have come out somewhere around that time. I'm really trying to remember the first iPhone, but I don't think it took a real hit, because I remember BlackBerry was still technically going strong until they came up with that one. There was one particular BlackBerry phone I hated. I'm trying to remember the name. I think it was the BlackBerry Flame or Black Torch. It was the Torch. I couldn't stand that phone. Reason why I have bad memories of that phone is because it kept on turning on and off on me.
At that point, BlackBerry was just dominating the US market.
And the company didn't yet see the iPhone as a big threat.
The problem with them is really sort of in the bottom 40 there. It's this stuff right here. They all have these keyboards that are there whether you need them or not to be there. Well, what we're going to do is get rid of all these buttons and just make a giant screen.
This
The
guy
iPhone was
says,
something
let's just
consumers
get
had
rid of the
never seen
buttons.
before. The iPhone was a full touchscreen device, and that was a huge leap in innovation.
No. The draw with BlackBerry was the buttons. It was the idea of still having the buttons that made it so easy to text that it was convenient. The screen, I don't think it had hit, well, with my circle anyway, it hadn't hit that area just yet where we found it more convenient to use a screen versus the buttons. All of us still preferred the buttons as opposed to the screen.
Innovation at that point for the mobile industry. BlackBerry was still using physical keyboards at that point.
But the iPhone didn't kill BlackBerry immediately. It just signed its death warrant. Research in Motion released a BlackBerry flip phone in 2008, quickly followed by the BlackBerry
That
Storm,
thing.
its first touchscreen device.
No, not that one.
The Storm was trashed by critics who called it a definite letdown because of the phone's sluggish performance and bugginess. But BlackBerry phones
it's a
still
torch.
continued to sell for a few reasons.
No, it was that one.
The iPhone was expensive and exclusive to
I
AT&T
hated that
until
thing.
2011, forcing customers in the US to either switch providers or pick a different phone. And very simply, people just didn't want to give up their keyboards. So for a while, BlackBerry was fine. But the company underestimated how quickly the smartphone market was changing. There was a new, updated iPhone every year, and other smartphones like the Motorola Droid began to hit shelves. It tried to keep up. It rolled out new, innovative devices like the Playbook tablet and Torch, but the devices were not well received. The Playbook even shipped without an email app, which, to a business-minded customer base, made it useless. BlackBerry's death rattle came in June 2010 with the release of the iPhone 4. Soon after,
This was a killer. Myself, all of my colleagues, everyone I knew had this phone. When this phone came out, I have very fond memories of this phone because it was one of the first phones that I ever used to download a string of movies. And I remember sitting there watching a couple of movies, and the first movie I watched on it was Monsters Inc. And the clarity and how it played and the ability to stream was a deal breaker for me when it came down to BlackBerry. I was sold and I was not going back. Everyone I knew had this phone because I had movies on this thing, I had music on this thing, I had games on this thing. I literally had everything on it, and it was so quick for the time especially, right? And it was so quick and so convenient that there was no way on earth that I was about to go back to what BlackBerry was offering when I first experienced a phone that had literally almost everything that I needed in it.
Apple's phone sales surpassed BlackBerry for the second time, but this time they stayed there.
Yep.
BlackBerry was slow to change. Its company ethos was built around designing a great product that just worked and iterating on it very slowly. To that end, they would add small features over time, but they weren't shooting for big, sweeping changes that would shock and delight consumers.
The phones missed out on a bunch of features that appealed to consumers, like high-quality front and back cameras. Research in Motion's global market share began a downward spiral, going from 20% in 2009 to less than 5% by the end of 2012. In 2013, Research in Motion officially changed its name to BlackBerry. That same year, it finally released its spec-competitive touchscreen phone, but it was just too late. At this point, people were locked into either iPhone or Android.
Too little, too late.
More than 432 million smartphones sold worldwide in the fourth quarter of 2016, but only about 200,000.
I want to make sure I'm seeing that correctly. In the fourth quarter of 2016, more than 432 million smartphones were sold. 207,900 were BlackBerry devices. That is horrible. That is absolutely atrocious. In the marketplace, that's barely even a percentage. Listen, when you have Apple and you have Samsung going so strong, and then you have, the other streams of phone companies that are all coming out trying to get a piece of the pie, I'm not surprised to see that BlackBerry fell behind, even though I'm pretty sure at one point they had a chance to innovate and they just chose to stick with what they had already.
One of those were BlackBerry devices, which officially made BlackBerry's smartphone market share 0%.
Ouch.
And in 2016, Chinese consumer electronic company TCL essentially bought the BlackBerry phone brand. This led to the company's departure from the smartphone market, 14 years after the release of its first phone. But the phones lived on, sort of.
Introducing the new BlackBerry Classic with more power and control than ever before.
The deal was for TCL to design and manufacture the hardware, while BlackBerry provided the software. But more recent BlackBerry phones run on an Android operating system, not a BlackBerry one. This gives users their beloved App Store and many more customization options. The latest BlackBerry phone, the Key 2, was released in 2018, and it might be the last. The BlackBerry 5G, slated for release in 2021, never appeared, And in December 2021, the company
They
announced it
tried,
would
but
fully
it was a little
decommission its
too
operating
late.
system, meaning that older BlackBerry phones would no longer be expected to reliably function.
Hated that ball.
It was the final nail in the coffin for the phenomenon that was the BlackBerry. But BlackBerry the company lives on, mainly making cybersecurity software. And despite their downfall, these iconic phones will always be bricks in the foundation of smartphone history.
So that is the gist of the rise and fall of BlackBerry taken by Insider News. It is at least good to know what it is that happened with this company, to see how it was at one point on top and then to see how it all came crashing down. It was a good phone for the time being. They did do a good job when it came down to marketing. They did a good job when it came down to software. And I believe overall the phone was actually a good phone. It just fell to the competition. Apple, as I stated earlier, when Apple really rolled out that iPhone 4, it was a deal breaker. And then, of course, when Samsung came out with their own line of phones, that was just too much for them. So they got hit a little too hard. So let me know what you guys think. Do you have any fond memories at all of the BlackBerry? Which one was your favorite? Did you hate the phone? Did you like the phone? And at what point in time did you switch over, if you switched over at all? Whatever you think, let me know in the comment section, and I will see you for the next video. See ya.